mothers, okay, mothers with sons. Um, I'll start with the Maya Angelou quote. She says, "We delight in the beauty of the butterfly, but rarely admit the changes it has gone through to achieve that beauty." And such is motherhood, and such is the relationship between mothers and sons. I'll speak a little bit about my own mother and that relationship, and really try to contrast it with where we are today. Um, my mother is the oldest of four. We were born in Stedman, North Carolina, which is right outside of Fayetteville. We were born on a farm about 100 and some acres. Um, and so that was the life I knew. Um, and she was the oldest of four. She had three brothers, and I'm the oldest of six. So growing up on a farm, we each had, as you probably know, sounds like I'm really talking about the 18th century or the 19th century rather than the 20th century. Um, because growing up in rural North Carolina, especially Eastern North Carolina, I always felt that there was some sort of conspiracy against me, being the oldest of six children, because no matter where I went, it seemed that someone knew me or knew my mother or knew uh, my uncles and knew my whole family. Same thing, my mother was a minister in the church, which was sort of rare during that time because generally women weren't ministers in church. But she was 5 feet 10. She wore these huge Sunday hats that was fashionable with women during the day. And she was very proud of herself. Um, and I had four brothers and one sister. So um, whether it was going to school, someone, her last name was Carter, my father was a Fisher. But at school, people knew my cousins who had preceded me, and there were expectations that I was going to do as well as they did. You know, they would say, "Oh, you're one of those Carter boys. Um, I know your parents. I know your people." If I went to church, it was, "I know your mom. I know your uncles." If I went to the local country store, someone knew my parents. And so I thought, I can never get out of their reach. Someone knows me. They have these high expectations for me. And it was a little overwhelming for me as a young kid because I thought no matter where I go, they got me. They know what I'm going to do. And someone was always tattletelling on me. If I made some, shall we say, small minor error in judgment, whether it was getting in a fight at school or whatever it was. But that would ultimately get back to my parents, especially my mom. And my mom would say, "You're not going to embarrass my family. You're not going to embarrass the Carter name." And she really had high expectations for me. And conversely, when I was with my uncles, um, I never knew weak people growing up. My mother was strong. My uncles worked the farm and they were strong. So I was just always around people that were really strong and had high expectations, and they were really intense. Um, I'm not sure. And even though I did well in school, my mother told me that I had to do well because if I didn't do well, she would say, then your siblings, your brothers and your sisters, they're not going to do well. So I didn't know that I had the option of not doing well in school. It was just expected that I was going to do well in school. And my father never graduated from school. I think he went to the eighth grade and he dropped out to work on the farm. And he didn't really necessarily have the expectation that I would go to college or whatever, but he did have the expectation that I would work hard. He was a hard working man and he worked on the farm. And his thing was, he said, it's a sorry man who doesn't support his family. And so he worked at Borden Chemical Company for 40 years almost. And then he did side jobs. And on the weekends, we would, my brothers and I, we would mow lawns, paint houses, whatever it took to provide. As you can imagine what it was like with a large family. Um, because cooking a chicken or something like that for 5 boys wasn't going to work, because my mother would cook like 2 chickens and spaghetti and a pan of biscuits, and she would go back in the closet and find, this time of the year, peaches and other things that the women had canned, and we ate everything. And so that was it. So as soon as I got off the bus, I knew I had to change into my work clothes, and I had work to do. I had to chop wood and um, that type stuff, and feed the hogs, and get on the tractor, and that type stuff. So that was just the expectation. And then after that, I had to do my homework. And that's what my mother expected me to do. And that's what she expected all of us to do. There was just no compromise. She was super intense about that. There was just no compromise whatsoever. And so I did what my mother expected me to do. And um, but I can't say that I had strong ambitions myself. I really had no idea what I was going to do with my life. Um, in the day, my mother would take all of us to uh, Oral Roberts was big in the day, and there was another guy called A. Allen, and they have these tent meetings. You guys are probably too young to know what I'm talking about. And so invariably, we would go to these tent meetings, and my cousins were all ministers. I grew up in a family of ministers, and I think my mother had aspirations that I would be a minister at some point. As hard as that is to believe, but I really didn't know what I wanted to do, and so I remember telling her that I wanted to be a carpenter like Christ. I thought that would impress her. Um, but I felt a swift right hand coming straight to my face, telling me, number one, you're not Christ, you're Darryl Fisher. And number two, you're going to college. And number three, you're going to get a degree. Again, I didn't know that I had a choice. And so I ended up going to federal state, just like my mom told me. And I basically, I did well in school, and conversely, my brothers all imitated me and my sister, and they all went to school. And it's remarkable when I look back on it, because it's not like we had a lot of money or a lot of resources, but we had supportive family and people who had high expectations that we would do well. And then there was a conspiracy that um, you couldn't get away from your family. No matter where you went, I always felt that I was attached to my family, and I always felt a sense of family. And I felt that if I didn't do well, I would be letting my family down.
Mm. Oh.
So that that's that's how I was brought up. But I want to contrast that with my experience as an elementary principal, and especially with males, and specifically Black males. Um, when I moved back to North Carolina, I taught in Albuquerque public schools after I got out of the military, um, and I did that for about 4 years. And then I got my master's at the University of New Mexico and moved back to North Carolina. And I started in Granville County Schools at South Granville High School as an assistant principal. And then the next year, I became a principal at Creedmoor Elementary in Granville County, in Creedmoor, North Carolina. And one of the things that I noticed, um, Um, this is when state testing really took off, was about the latter part of the 80s, first part of the 90s. And I noticed that um, of all the groups, whether it was Black males, white females, Hispanic, etc., that the lowest achieving group always was the Black males. And it really bothered me. And I thought, surely there must be a reason for this. And so I started looking around and I thought, let me look at the data. And, and then I realized that 64% of Black children live in a single parent family, 64%. So that means that almost 2 out of every 3 African American children live in a family where it's just one parent. And generally, that parent is a mother. And why is this significant? It's significant because the mother, more than the father, affects student achievement. Okay? And you ask why. Generally, fathers are working, etc., but mothers have a more personal relationship with the child and have a more one-on-one relationship with the child than the fathers do. And so my thought was, if we can change that dynamic, at least in the schools that I was in, um, then maybe we can increase student achievement. And I would often hear these notions that, all kids can learn, all of that. But I didn't really see teachers act as if they really believe that. And I wasn't going to have any of that, to be honest with you, as a principal. And I was young. I became a principal at 30 years old, and I had my own family at the time. But I thought, if we can get into the community and get parents more involved, and especially mothers more involved, then maybe that could change some things. And so that's what we did, trying to find a staff that really believed that believed that, we can make a difference was the first step. So we would do things like um, have parent teacher conferences in the community. We would go to community centers and have parent teacher conferences. And since we were a Title I school, we would use that money to have parents come to the school, especially mothers come to the school and work with their kids. We have parent conferences for the mothers to show them how to work with their kids. Because in many cases, um, mothers and parents, and especially kids from low income families, had negative experiences themselves in schools. And so when they came to school, they felt either they were going to have a negative experience with the principal or with the teachers. And I thought, we got to change that. And I realized that it takes a lot of work to get people to realize that all kids can learn. If given the opportunity, all kids can learn. And African American boys in particular, um, they're going to be a little bit more active. Okay. They might talk back a little bit more, but they have a brain and they have the capacity to learn just like any other kids do. And over time, um, uh, Wilburn, the school where I was, we were the only Title I school, and Title I schools are those schools that have high um, high free and reduced lunch. So at the time when I was a principal, we had 90% of our kids on free and reduced lunch, but we also had 90% of our kids that are above grade level. And it really, I heard my sister say that it takes a whole village to raise uh, a child. And people say that as if it's some sort of axiom, but the question is, do they really believe that? And and in America, the question is, do we really believe that all kids have the ability to learn? And if we do, then all of our resources need to be directed to that to make sure that we're doing everything we can to make sure that our kids have every opportunity to learn. And to a large extent, um, the connection between church and school, we seem to be afraid of that. But when I was a principal, we partnered with, so if if I was a principal at school X, all of the uh, schools that surrounded me, me and the social worker and some other teachers would go out and meet with those ministers to see if they would support the school. By support, I mean having parents come and read to the kids, work with the kids, et cetera, et cetera. They couldn't proselytize, they couldn't preach, but they could work with the kids. They would bring snacks, they would work with the teachers, all of that. um, Growing up, um, school and church and community, all of those were institutions that were so tied together that I really didn't know one from another. The teacher went to my school. When I went to church, I could see my teacher, I could see other people that I knew, but we had become so disconnected as a community now that it's really difficult to do that. So the question is, what role does the church play in supporting schools and education? And I think um, that churches need to be more activist in terms of supporting schools. How can, going to the school, how can we support you? Are there retirees like myself who can work with kids? Whatever it takes, especially the African American students. If these, particularly again boys, see that someone has an interest in them, you'd be amazed at what impact it has on them, and what if they just adopt one kid that they're going to work with, you'd be amazed at what an impact it has. Also, mentoring programs. If if um, if if churches and other community agencies can work with our kids, especially African American males, I'm going to speak to those because that's the group that I know the best. And those, even now, when they look at what they call the achievement gap, the achievement gap hasn't changed in the last 20 years. Okay, so African American boys are the lowest achieving group of any group, including Hispanics. Okay, they're still the lowest achieving group, and the question is, why is that? A lot of it goes back to um, that 64% of Black children live in a single parent family, which means that a lot of these kids don't necessarily have the same resources that other kids have. They have a single mother who doesn't have the income in many cases to support the kids. And after boys reach a certain age, they need interaction with other males. Okay. My grandson is 5 now, and his sister follows him like who's 4 years old. Tonight I was just watching, she stalks him because whatever he does, she wants to be a part of whatever he does. And so she said, Papa, where is Carter? And I said, and he was in the room on his tablet watching some whatever it was he was watching. I said, Maya, just leave him alone. Let him have some time to himself. And boys, especially Black boys, tend to be a little different. Number one, we tend to be more active. In many cases, we like to be by ourselves. We might talk a little bit more in the classroom, and those things are okay. It's okay. But boys, while they need their mothers, after a certain age, they also need to have men coming in. So again, back to that whole activist thing about churches, it would be great if we could see men going into schools and men working with some of these boys. But the thing about it is, if you say that you're going to work with them, you have to be consistent. Because if you're not consistent, it validates everything that they already believe about men. You say you're going to do one thing, but you don't show up. And if you see little boys who are waiting for their dads to come and eat lunch with them, and their dads don't show up, just the look on their faces, you know, it's just, if I believe right now, we're talking about mothers with sons, that if we don't do something soon, we're going to lose a whole generation of kids, and especially African American kids. Most recently, we've seen the activism during the Trump administration, where everybody's saying, let's fight together, let's get together, all of that type stuff. I just hope that that doesn't wane and that we can see that expressed in a more concrete ways where we're working with kids, again, mothers with sons, fathers with sons. They're all of our kids. So when we say it takes a whole village, it's just the whole concept that we all need to do something to help these little boys because they're falling farther and farther behind. And if you look at colleges, kids that are going into college now, females, it's like 6 to 8 to 1 compared to black males. So when my granddaughter gets ready to get married, who is she going to marry? You know, um, we're really at a crisis point right now. The whole notion is that the family is a fundamental building block for our society,
Amen.
and we should celebrate rather than denigrate the role of motherhood. Um, the role of motherhood is the most important choice a woman can make. Um, and I realize now women have so many choices that they never had before, but being a mother is the most noble choice a woman can make. And it's their choice to make. Strong families remain our greatest defense against poverty and crime. So we have to do something to work on that. And then there's the trauma of being Black in America. Um, every day, there's a mental calculus that we Blacks all endure. Okay. We have to put on that other face. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm sorry, but it's uh, who is that authentic you? You know, in the morning when you get ready to go to work, you have to take that deep sigh because you know that you're going to have stuff that you're going to have to deal with that day. And your kids are watching you to see how do you negotiate that? Uh, how does mom negotiate that? You have to put the smile on. You have to be 110% better. You have to do all of that. And and if someone stops you, you have to have that discussion with your kids about um, how you act and how you dress and don't wear the saggy pants, all of that, just to go to school, just to survive each day. And it's tough being a Black kid in America. It's tough being Black in America. But these are discussions we have to continue to have with our sons because at some point, that relationship between mother and son, about fourth to fifth grade, you notice that sons start developing their own sense of they just want to be by themselves, they want to be independent, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's where men are going to have to step in and do a better job because it takes male and female, it takes mom and dad, it takes um, significant others, male and female, if we really want to change the dynamic of what's happening with our sons and our Black sons in America, because I believe we're at a crisis point right now. Um, and if we don't do something soon, I, I'm just afraid of where we're going. It's really frightening to be honest with you. But it's not too late. Um, and Black boys need to see men, strong men in their lives. They need to see that. And it's part of who they are, but they also need to see strong moms. And um, I hope that um, going forward, that churches will assume that activist role that they used to have because um, prayer is the one thing I think that makes a difference. I know it's made a difference in my life. Um, no one could have imagined That's this little black boy from Stedman, North Carolina. Would I know I couldn't have imagined it myself. And if you were to ask anybody who was going to school with me, would Darryl Fisher become a teacher or would he become a principal? 9 out of 10 of them would have probably said no. They said he would have probably been something, but he'd have probably been working on the farm, working on the tractor, um, especially this time of the year, getting those soybeans in, because that was my future. But my mother saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And she was determined that I was going to see it. And her determination really impacted me. And my father, while he didn't necessarily see that, his work ethic is something that I saw. And and I respected my father for that. Um, I'm not sure that he ever wanted me to go to college, but he did want me to get a job. But it was both of them. My mother's intense um, vision for me that I didn't have for myself. And with our kids, many of them don't have a vision for what they want to do with their own lives. And sometimes we need to tell them what their vision is. One last thing, um, my granddaughter she will say, uh, when my wife cooks some food, she says, I don't like it. And I'll say, yes, you do. Whatever your grandmom cooks, you like it. And you're going to taste it. And if you don't like it, we'll deal with it, but you're at least going to taste it. Grits is the thing. She says, I don't, it just didn't look right, right? And so she said, I don't like it. And I said, oh, yes, you do. Don't tell me what you don't like. I'll tell you what you like. And she tried it and she said, it's good, Papa. I said, see, I told you it's good. So um, a lot of kids don't know what they want to do. I was one of those. I had no idea what I what I wanted to do. Um, Become a carpenter like Jesus Christ. That's what I thought I wanted to do. But I really had no idea. I really had no idea what I wanted to do. And the fact that I'm here now and that I'm still alive, I attribute that to all of those people who saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And I attribute that to this conspiracy that I talk about. All of those other people who took an interest in me, my cousins, my uncles, people in the grocery store, people who knew my family, um, this family larger than my own family. And while we don't have that anymore, we can still have that in church. We need to approach young people, talk to them, say, how are things going? What's going on? Believe it or not, at some age, as a parent, you don't know anything. Once your kids get about 11 years, 12 years old, you just don't know anything. And you probably won't know anything till they're about 21 or 22. Then it's amazing how intelligent you become all of a sudden. My daughter, who told me that I was the stupidest dad ever when she was 14, now calls me and says, hey, dad, okay, can you help me? I think it's so funny. So, our kids, they need these other adults in their lives.
Yeah.
And they need that conspiracy to continue. And you never realize just what an impact you may have on another child just by saying, how are you doing? How are you doing in school? What kind of grades are you making? You can do it. Don't give up. And especially our boys, they need that. Um, and something other than just sports, because they hear that all the time. And people assume that, that's what you're into. But let's encourage them academically. You can do well. You can become whatever you want to become, because really they can. And that's all I have to say about that. Um, again, I just thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you tonight. And hope I didn't ramble too much, but I do want to end. I started on with the saying, and I'll end one. First Lady Michelle Obama says, "Find people who make you better. Find people who make you better." So I would encourage you to encourage our kids to find people who make them better.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Brother Fisher. I'm gonna mute you and see if I can get rid of the echo. Okay, is that it's still an echo? I won't talk as much, but thank you so much. After a message like that, it feels like we need to do something. We need to, like you say, adopt a school. But as I see people, are you guys hearing the echo as well?
Yes.
You are hearing that? Okay. So I won't talk as much, but it feels like, but there are some people on the call, and I don't want to put anybody on the spot that's doing some great things that they may want to encourage others to get involved in. Like you said, we need to, help a school or adopt a child, take an interest in a child. But something that you said earlier, your family had high expectations for you. Do you think children excel to what we expect? And you have to unmute, Brother Fisher. Are you able to unmute?
I got it.
Okay.
Did I unmute now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I think kids live up to or live down to whatever our expectations are.
Yeah.
They don't know any better. Um, I tell my granddaughter, I say, "You're intelligent, you're beautiful, and you're a genius." And if you speak those kinds of words into people, they begin to believe it. And the younger, the better. Yeah, I believe that.
I agree. You talked about approaching a kid and talking to them, just carrying on a conversation with them, asking them questions and encouraging them. One thing that you said too that was interesting when you were, I guess you were an elementary school principal, you were saying y'all were working to get the mothers involved.
Right.
And when you were saying that, I was thinking, I would think you would be wanting to get the fathers involved, but then you spoke to that later, where later the men really do need to get involved. So you did get your fathers involved as well.
I think it's a question of what does involved mean. Okay. Yeah. So in many cases, when mothers come to school, it's because the kid has gotten into trouble. Okay. And when the kid gets in trouble, they generally don't call the father first. They call the mom first. So when the mom gets involved, it's generally for some disciplinary stuff. And if it's a little boy, that's what the little boy hears all the time. You're going to call my mom, I'm going to get in trouble, blah, 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 blah. So I would call the dad. And when I could, and it's amazing the different kind of response you get when you call. Sometimes when I'd say, "I'm going to call your mom," they would go, "Go ahead, call my mom." And I would go, "Okay, let me call your dad." Totally different. Totally different. So this dad would go, "Look, I'm working. I don't have time to get off work and come up there. You got to get your act together, blah, blah, blah." End of story. Mom, totally. So when I say get involved, I mean, go to the school, go to the PTA meetings, let your face be in the place. Believe it or not, teachers talk about parents. And they talk about parents who don't get involved. And you show your face in the place the first time your kid has a problem or an issue, they know who you are, and they're going to be much more receptive to you. Yeah.
Comments or questions from any? Brother Fisher mentioned this is a critical time for our families.
Lori, I think impressing upon the kid the value of education early on.
The recording, I said